Okay, grammar. I get it. You hate it. You find it boring. You think it's confusing. It makes you want to rip your freaking eyes out of their sockets. I understand. I was there too once. But it's really not all that difficult to write pretty basic, pretty simple sentences. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to learn how to write basic, simple sentences. And we're going to do that by learning what the independent clause is. Yes, the independent clause. If you don't know what an independent clause is, you cannot write complicated sentences. So we're going to start there. And once we learn what an independent clause is, then we're going to build on it. And it's going to be wonderful. You'll be able to write awesome sentences. And you're going to wonder, why wasn't I taught this stuff before? So what the heck is an independent clause? Well, in order to have an independent clause, you must have at least two things. The first thing is called the subject, and the second thing is called the predicate, also known as the verb. It's also nice to have a third thing, and that thing is usually referred to as the object or the modifier of the sentence. These three things are sometimes referred to as the syntactic slots of the sentence. Do you need to know that? Not really. We're going to take those three syntactic slots and we're going to change the names of them to make it easier. We're going to call the subject the actor. We're going to call the predicate the action. And we're going to call the object or the modifier the answer. By renaming them the actor, action, and answer, all you have to remember is A. Let's begin with the actor. The actor is the first thing that should show up on stage. If we don't know who or what is doing the action, we're going to be confused. So we begin there. Remember, the actor is usually referred to as the subject of the sentence. It is always someone or something, and there are 5 different types we're going to look at. The first type of actor is the person actor. Some examples of person actors are Elmo, my mother, the President of the United States, the guy with the green hair. Any one of these could function as the first part of your independent clause. The second type of actor is the place actor. Florida, the mall, the empty park, the dark city. So remember, it does not have to be a person getting up on stage and performing the first part of your independent clause. It could be a location. Next, there is the thing actor, the chair, a mossy rock, the newspaper, the steam train. These are all tangible things. They are things you can see, smell, touch, taste, or hear. The opposite of the thing actor is the idea actor. Love, beauty, normalcy, insanity. Ideas cannot be seen, smelled, touched, tasted, or heard. They are abstract, and much like abstract art, they have many different definitions. We'll talk more about abstractions later on. I made up the name for the fifth actor. The fifth actor I call the verb actor. Running, jumping, skipping around the house, bouncing. I call these verb actors because they look like verbs, but they're not verbs. They're called gerunds or gerund phrases. Whenever you see a word that ends with ing, be careful. Don't get them confused with verbs. Many of you may have noticed that sometimes the actor will be kind of short, just a word or two, the boy, the car, it. Sometimes the actor will be a little bit longer, the boy with the long hair, the green car with the tinted windows, the thing in the other room that is making a gurgling noise. And sometimes you're going to have more than one actor. Luis and Tina, or Luis, Tina, and Jean. Don't worry about that. Sometimes you'll have, like I said, one actor, sometimes you'll have 2 or 3 actors, and sometimes you'll have these extended, stretched out actors, which can come in the forms of phrases or dependent clauses. We'll talk about all that stuff later on. Just for now, remember that if you can replace the entire word or group of words with he, she, it, they, or some other pronoun, you probably are dealing with an actor. So now we know the first part of the independent clause, the actor. Once the actor is on stage, he or she or it must do something. That is the second part of the independent clause, the second syntactic slot. It's called the action of the sentence, otherwise known as the verb or the predicate. Here is a list of actions, and all of these actions are called to-be verbs. They're called to-be verbs because they all deal with the idea of simply just being. You can remember these to-be verbs by singing them to the tune of Jingle Bells, and that would sound something like this. Am, is, are, do, does, did, have, has, had, was, were, should, would, could, may, might, must, will, be, being, been, can. Sorry about that. Now, these are all to-be verbs. They're not very exciting. If an actor got on stage and just stood there, they just were, the audience would probably get up and leave. So we do want to use more powerful verbs, but these technically are verbs. They technically do complete the second part of an independent clause. The last 2 columns there, should, would, could, may, might, must, will, be, being, been, can. These can never stand alone. They can never be used as sole verbs. You wouldn't say, for example, the boy would to the store. It doesn't sound right, it doesn't make sense. They must be attached to another verb. And we'll look at more examples of those later on. So again, technically, to be verbs are actions. They are the second part of an independent clause, but they're pretty freaking boring. So you're going to want to mix it up a little bit. You're going to want to use more vivid or more visual verbs. Visual verbs, vivid verbs, they create images in your writing, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to create an image that your reader can kind of see and imagine for him or herself. So if you have a sentence like the kids are tired, well, that's perfectly fine. It's technically a good sentence, but the verb are is boring. So why not change it and have something like the kids drowse in the back seat? Now we have a better image of those kids in the back seat, and that again is what you're trying to do. You're trying to create clarity for your reader. So now we've done it. We've completed the first two parts, the two necessary parts of an independent clause, the actor and the action. But there is that third part that is nice to add as well. That third part is called the answer. Was there a question? Yes, there's always 6 questions to consider when finishing your sentence. The 6 questions are who, what, when, where, why, and how. So if we take an actor like Bob, we give him an action, perhaps is, we finish the sentence by asking the right question or the right questions. So Bob is what? Bob is old. Bob is where? Bob is in the garage. Bob is who? Bob is my friend. Bob is when? Well, sometimes the answer doesn't make sense, so we skip that one and we move on to the next one. Bob is why? We don't need to get existential here, we'll move on. Bob is how? Bob is angry. And once you've answered at least one of those 6 questions, you know you're done. You know you have an independent clause. You have an actor, you have an action, and you have an answer. You filled all 3 syntactic slots. All you have to do is remember A. Let's try a couple more just to make sure we got it. In this first example, we're going to have an extended actor, the boy in the front row. His action will be snores, and the answer will be where? In class. We put it all together, and what we get is the boy in the front row snores in class. Just don't forget your period and you should be okay. Now earlier I kind of hinted that it's possible to have more than one answer in a sentence. Here's a situation where that's going to happen. We have an act or the mall. We have an action closed. And when did it close? Early. But why did it close? Well, it closed because it was Sunday. We take all that information we put together and we get the mall closed early because it was Sunday. But there's kind of a catch here. Early is a single word. It's a single word answer. But because it was Sunday is a dependent clause. And sometimes what's going to happen is you will get answers that come in the form of single words. You'll get answers that come in the form of phrases. And you'll even get answers in the form of dependent clauses. And we'll talk more about that later on. But for now, we're just going to treat them all as either short answers or longer extended answers. Now, there will be times when you'll have multiple actors, actions, or answers in your independent clause. In this example, we have multiple actors, running, jumping, and sneaking. The action is are, and the answer is the arts of the ninja. Put it all together, you get running, jumping, and sneaking are the arts of the ninja. There will be times when you'll get what I like to call roaming slots. In this example, it looks like we have 4 syntactic slots, but we really don't. We just have 2 answers, and one of those answers moved out of its typical order. It moved from the back of the sentence, from the end of the sentence, to between the actor and the action, and that answer, of course, is quietly. When you put the sentence together, you get the ninja quietly slips through the dark. If we had wanted to, we could have said the ninja slips quietly through the dark. We could have put quietly at the end of the sentence, but we didn't. All you really have to know is that sometimes this happens in sentences, and just be aware that when it does happen, all that's going on really is the slots are roaming around a little bit. Here's another example of the slots moving around. In this case, we have something called inversion. And inversion is when the answer slot slips in front of the actor in the action slot. If we were to write this sentence out, we would write, swiftly he strikes. And that's fine when that happens. You could have written this as he strikes swiftly, but it's really up to you. If it sounds good, you can invert it. If it doesn't, put the actor first. Another problem you might run into is what I call tricky non-verbs. They look like verbs, but they're really not. In the first sentence, running, jumping, and sneaking are the ways of the ninja. Remember, these are called verb actors. In the next example, the stalking ninja slips through the dark. Well, stalking does look like a verb here, but it is not. It is describing the ninja. This is technically called a participle. And the ninja loves to run, jump, and sneak. Even though it looks like these are verbs to run, jump, and sneak, these are called infinitives, and they are not verbs either. So please, even though they might look like verbs, don't automatically assume they are verbs. One final problem you might run into is sometimes you're going to have a single actor doing more than one action to more than one answer. When this happens, Just make sure that the appropriate action remains close or adjacent to the appropriate answer. In this case, we have the actors, the tree. The actions are looms and sways. Well, logically, it probably looms over the yard and it probably sways in the wind. So that's how we'll write this out. The tree looms over the yard and sways in the wind. After you write your sentence, just make sure that the actions work well with the answers and they make sense, and then you should be all right. And that's really all there is to it. It's pretty simple when you think about it. Yeah, this entire time we've been using subjects and predicates and prepositional phrases and adverbs and indirect objects and direct objects. We've been using a whole bunch of technical grammatical terms, but do you need to know all those terms? No, not really. When you want to create a simple sentence, when you want to create an independent clause, all you really need to know is that you must have an actor, you must have an action, and a lot of times it's nice to have an answer as well. If you can put those three things together and they make sense, then you have what I call a foundational clause. And from there, you can build on that foundational clause and you can make some really cool sentences. Now, is that all? Are we done? No, not yet. We do know how to create an independent clause. We know how to create a foundational clause, but now we need to learn how to build on that foundational clause. And before we do that, we have to discuss something called phrases and dependent clauses. And we're going to do that in lesson 2, and I hope you all will join me. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.